All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the final Tableau meeting of 2020. So hopefully next year we will be able to go back to doing this in person versus remote. But I really appreciate you guys all being here. Hopefully some really helpful information for you guys, quick takeaways that you can take back to your work starting right away. Be sure, if you haven't already, connect with us on Facebook. The group name is NWA Tug. The email or the URL is there, as well as sign up for subscribe to the event notifications through the Tableau site. So it's usergroups.tableau.com, Northwest Arkansas. So with that, we're going to go through the agenda. Today, we're going to do a little bit on mapping. So dual axis maps, custom regions, go over designing with the user in mind, then go through some data visualization theory, and really leave some open time for discussion between you guys. So the whole point of the user group, right? I'm just doing this for the community in general, so we can learn from each other and figure out best practices. So our leadership team, hi, if I didn't say it already, my name is Megan Putney. I work for Mike's Hard Lemonade as a category manager. We also have Marty Moss, who founded this group, as well as Scott Taylor, who is on the call today and is going to walk us through mapping. So as the usual, just the mandatory antitrust guidelines, we're all here to learn, don't do anything illegal, don't discuss price or anything like that. We're just trying to learn about Tableau and have fun with data visualization. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Scott.
All right, so you can see my screen, I assume. All right, we're going to start out with everyone's favorite data source, Sample Superstore. So fun with maps, kind of like fun with flags, but no Amy Farrah Fowler to help us out. So what I want to do is just quickly make a map and just show you how easy it is. Maps are one of my favorite things in Tableau because they're just so simple and so easy to get started with. So if you highlight a couple of pills like the state, for example, which is a geography, and you can tell that it has the little globe there. So Tableau recognizes this as a geographical type of an object versus text. You see the ABCs, and numbers, of course, have the pound sign. So we can come over here to the Show Me button, and we see that the map options are available. So I can click on the field map here and quickly do a field map by state for profit. If I click the Show Me toggle again to make that disappear, of course, if I want to turn on the labels, I can do that. If I want to format the labels, it's pretty easy to just go into formatting, and perhaps I want to make this custom currency and have one decimal place and maybe show it in thousands instead. And if I want to tweak my label a little bit, I can come up here and say maybe it should be bold. So it's just that easy to get started with a map and a couple of pieces of information. Of course, we have multiple years of history in the data source, so maybe I would want to, let's use the ship date, create a way to filter different years that we may want to look at based on the ship date. And of course, we could show that filter over here and begin to work with it. Let me move that up out of the way there. I always like to use the apply button, makes it handy. So if I wanted to just look at all the years, for example, and see all my history over time, I could do that. So another thing about maps, of course, you can work with them just like charts. So small multiples is something that's great in Tableau. And if I wanted to do a small multiple map, maybe I wanted to see this information year by quarter. Well, that's easy to do too. I could come in, take the ship date, and maybe let's put the years on the rows. So I'll pick the year and say, okay, now I have the years going down. Let's pick the ship date again. If I drop it in, and maybe I want to see the quarters,
And Scott, I think we might need to, it might be lagging a little bit on your screen.
Okay.
So if it is does it have 4 maps on the screen right now? There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
There we
So
go.
there we
It's just a little laggy.
go. Okay. Sorry about that.
Always the virtual 2020.
The challenges of virtual meetings. So you can see scrolling down, we have the years, and scrolling across, we have the quarters. So it's very easy to see visually if there are areas that are geographies that have different profitabilities based on time, whether it's quarter or year. Maybe we wanted to see the category by year instead of the quarter. So I can just drag category up here and drop and replace it. And now we have the categories going across and the years going down. And let's trim a couple of these off just so it kind of fits on the screen nicely. So it's just that easy to do small multiples. We can see that technology is fairly profitable in Texas everywhere. We can see that it looks like Texas is becoming less and less profitable as time goes on because that orange color is getting darker in office supplies, and furniture is kind of holding steady. So quick analysis that way. So now let's look at how to define a region. So we have region in the data, but it's not a geography. You can see it's just text. And we can see that up here we have, of course, our state. So if I were to highlight the state and show the map again, I can see all of the different states, and maybe I'll do sales just so we can have some color variance there, and maybe I'll go with green because money and green and sales, it just all goes together. If I can find green, there we go. So we can see California has a lot of cash going on. So how do I make region a custom geography? Well, first let's kind of take a peek at it. If I drag it up to the label, I can see that every state is associated with a region. I can see that across here. I could drag the region up here like I did the small multiples and be able to see that as it goes across. And we have a discrete relationship between state and region, so that makes it very easy for us. We can come in here to region, and if we click on it and drop it down, we can define the geographic role for a field as one of these things if it exists, or we can create it from something that exists. In this case, we know the relationship for region begins with state, so we can create that geographic role from the state. And now you can see region has the little globe on it where it used to have the ABCs. And if I were to drag and drop that over top of my state, now I can see that I have my regions there. It's just that easy.
Yeah, and as another point to this, I personally love to use this. It already automatically does all of your calculations will add up for that entire region. So any calculations, any sort of velocity metrics, those will all be good for that region in totality. Another great example of using this is Walmart DCs. You need to see by DC. You can see that grouped together if you have a list of all the zip codes included. Or another example is DMAs, so designated marketing areas. I like to look at that a lot with our business, understanding where do we over or under index in certain geographical areas, and then where you can turn on marketing to really either help, a lower performing region or see what's the best practices in a region that's really doing amazing.
Yep, very handy for that. So let's see, let's do a little bit more with that. So let me make state as part of a hierarchy here, which we could add region to that hierarchy now if we wanted to, but let me just duplicate the state and take it out of the hierarchy, or make a copy of it that's out of the hierarchy. So it'll be a little bit easier to work with for what I'm going to do now. So if I were to take the state and actually the state and the region and just build a map here. And if I were to take and drag both of these pills onto the color shelf, you can see that I get all of these different colors, and I get a legend for the combination of region and state out here. So sometimes we wonder if the order that these are in on the marks card matters. And in this case, because of the relationship, it does. So let me just hide this card here. So if I were to move state underneath the region, now you can see it has colored in the sections so that it makes sense. This region is all shades of orange, and this one is shades of green and shades of blue, and this is shades of yellow, which I don't like that yellow a lot. So if I wanted to change just that section, pretty easy to do that too. I can come up here and edit my colors. I can click on Arizona where it begins. I can go down to the bottom of the list, hold the shift key down and click again. So now I have all of these highlighted. If I wanted to pick a different palette, like maybe purple, and assign that palette, it's only going to assign the palette to what I have selected. So I can say okay, and now I have shades of purple for the West. So that's another thing. You can do this with pie charts. If you make like a dual axis pie chart where you have an inner and an outer set, you can control the shading like this too. It's very handy. So dual axising a map used to be kind of the standard, and probably still is the standard for a lot of people if you want to encode more information on the map. I did see in the Tableau virtual conference that we had that they are coming along with map layers. So eventually we'll be able to add things and encode different things on the map in layers instead of necessarily having to do a dual axis map. But dual axis maps, kind of like working with dual axis charts, very easy to create. Of course, if I wanted to start with above and below, I can just duplicate this pill, or I actually like working side to side, so I can duplicate this pill. And
that duplicated, Scott, just so if anyone, you're holding down the control key and dragging it over, is that right?
Exactly, yeah, just hold down the control key and drag it over and it duplicates it. So now that I have the two maps to work with, you can see on the marks card, I have these selectors, so I can control all, which would be both maps, or I can do the left map or the right map. For me, also, when you click on them up here, it changes it to the left map and the right map. And for me, it kind of helps me keep it straight when I work with these up here. So I'll oftentimes click up there. It's just something that I do. But to start working with the right map, as an example, if I want to pull off the state and the region from color, and I end up with just this sort of generic map, maybe I wanted the postal code in here as a level of detail. And instead of having the postal code be the actual geographic areas of the postal code, maybe I want to change that to be circles representing those areas. And maybe I want to show the profitability of these postal code locations on the map. So I can do that by dragging in the profit on the color for this right map here. And let's kind of clean this up and just make it good or bad. So I'm going to use a red-black diverging palette. I'm going to do stepped colors and just have two options, red or black. And I'm going to click on the advanced, and I'm going to center this at 0. So red will be below 0, black will be above 0, and say okay. So now I have my red and black stores. Of course, I did all this before I hit the dual axis option, but it's just like the charts. You come up here and click on this pill, you say dual axis. We don't have to worry about synchronizing a map like we do a chart. It just kind of works. But now we have our profitable postal codes layered over top of our regions just like this, and you can see the locations that are profitable and not profitable. Pretty handy.
And Scott, let's say I tried this and I'm not seeing the profitability dots. What would be a possible workaround? So hypothetically, I'm just thinking if they would have had it switched, right? So again, what Scott was showing you guys earlier, as far as it matters the order, whether he had region or state. Same thing if he were to flip-flop the longitude pills, I think it'll make it so the one doesn't show up. Or is that fixed with yours? Like if you flip-flop them?
I'm not tracking.
Like, can you flip-flop those two? I feel like one of the most
if I flip-flop these two, it
yeah,
will make
so then,
it will make those hide behind the other one. Yeah. So they're both of these objects up here that we've created still have all of the encoding on it, but this one is over top of the other one. So the one on the right side is always over top. And when you're creating like dual axis bar charts and stuff like that, it's important to know, because sometimes you'll frustrate yourself if you're trying to create a dual axis bar chart and you put the skinny bar on the wrong side. It's always hiding below the fat bar. So you can reorder these to bring the skinny bar to the top like you're wanting.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think the other thing too, Scott, if you weren't going to show it already, you can also customize your maps to make them a little bit cleaner, or whether you want a dark background or a light background, or removing some of the detail of the map.
Yeah, there's a ton of ways to control the maps up here. We have different backgrounds that we can look at. You can even connect online and do different things. We have the map layers that allow you to check and uncheck whatever layer you want to see. I have done some maps where I use the population. I can't remember if it was in this one or where it is. There is
Yeah,
one
it's under the data layer at the bottom. They have population, they have demographics.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Age.
Exactly. Households, occupations. So yeah, there's a lot of very creative things you can do with mapping beyond just the basics that we showed you today.
Yeah, the most common way I use this, so typically I will like for certain products that are more like the background's always black versus white, I'll change the style from light to dark. Do you want to show them the top there?
Yeah,
style.
let's just start with kind of a generic map and do that. So if I grab the state and maybe profit again and just show the map. So yeah, analysis, or sorry, map. So which one did you say, dark?
Yeah. And then the other way I like to do too is typically whenever I'm using it, I'll remove all the labels and everything, especially if I have something broken out by state specifically, just to make it really clean. I'm really bad at state names, so I keep those on there for myself, but I'll remove them for presentations.
So all of these you just get rid of.
Yep. So yeah, and then it's just a really, once he removes all of them, see, then you get a really clean map. And that helps a lot too when you're working with, like we had on the other one, right? There was regions, there was the profitability, so, and then the state detail. So there was so much going on. It just helps to really emphasize what exactly you're trying to show.
Yep. Anything else? If not, I'm ready to turn it back over to you, Megan.
All right.
All right, let me stop sharing.
Right, I will share my screen. Let me make sure I'm showing the correct one. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So the next thing I wanted to go over with you guys, this was actually presented at the Tableau conference back in Las Vegas when we could travel back in 2017. And I got the presentation from Alicia Olson and basically shortened it and adapted it for you guys. So whenever you talk about the design process, it's all about designing with the user in mind. And I feel like a lot with Tableau, you kind of just want to jump in there right away. And I don't recommend that. Similar to how whenever you create PowerPoint presentations, you create an outline or you'll draw it out on a piece of paper first. I do recommend doing the same thing with Tableau. Don't just start making dashboards out of nowhere. I recommend planning out, okay, what exactly do I want to see? And that's going to help save you a ton of time. So with this is the design process: discover, distill, ideate, and then validate. And we're going to go through each of these. So the first one is finding your user. So knowing who to talk to is just as important as actually talking to them. So the example here, like I said, I work for Mike's Hard Lemonade, and a couple of years back, we had this program that was advertising specifically to millennial men. And some of you may have seen the commercials. They were very out there, very odd. There was a sloth pulling his mouth. There was hamburgers flying around. And we thought, oh my God, we cannot show this to the Walmart buyers. Like, they're going to think we're crazy. But the whole thing is, we weren't the user. So when we were trying to attract millennial men, we found that this was actually what resonated with them. And we were playing it on the channels where it was most important. So in reality, even though we were not the users, it was really effective because it was talking to them specifically. I won't make you guys sit through the commercials. You can look them up later. But the whole point here is you're not the user. So make sure you know who the audience is and that you're tailoring it to them very specifically. The other piece is don't be swayed by who's paying for it. This is a HIPPO, a highly paid person's opinion. So when that VP tells you, no, it should look like this, is he the one that's going to be using it day in and day out? Maybe, maybe not. So again, be sure to talk to who is actually using it on the daily and not the customers who are paying for it. So as we go through these 4 steps, discover, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time by Henry Ford. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So a lot of times, especially when Tableau is new in an organization, the sales team doesn't necessarily even know what they want, right? Like they can't even imagine what's possible because they're so stuck in what they've just seen. So again, being able to figure out what do they want and asking questions. So first step is to question the obvious, and you should always ask why 5 times, which seems aggressive, but it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. So the example that she gave in this presentation was her dad's friend owned a Massey Toyota dealership. And he said, oh yeah, I want you to create me a dashboard with year and make of model over time. And she said, okay, why? And he said, oh, I want to understand what kind of cars are coming into my shop. She could have stopped there, right? Created a fancy dashboard. He would have been very impressed. Oh my God, this is incredible. Look at this. You could see when Priuses were coming in and, oh my God, this is fantastic. But it might not actually help him in the long run, and he would probably stop using it after a few weeks. So asking why again, it turns out he wanted to know what parts to keep on hand. So again, keep these questions open-ended. Don't just say, oh, do you want to see sales? They're going to say yes or no. Ask questions like, what kind of things do you want to see? What would you use this for? So then next step is, again, she asked why. He wants to know when a vehicle is waiting on the shipment, and then understand when a vehicle is waiting there, waiting for a part. And the end goal here, after your 5 whys, is really he just wanted to eliminate wasted time. So she ended up coming up with a dashboard that looks like this. So essentially marking versus goal, what was the time to complete versus estimated, which categories were most on hold, vehicles, etc. And the other piece here that's really helpful is contextual inquiry. So asking how they do it today, right? So this company, IDEO, wanted to create this great new iPad, really fancy for their nurses to be able to track all of the health data that was coming in. But once they spent a day with those nurses and walked around with them, they realized that a lot of times the nurses were holding people's hands or just comforting them. And they asked why. And it turns out that the nurses said part of their job is not just collecting that data, not just taking care of the patient, but making sure the patient is comfortable as well. And a lot of times that involves, holding their hand or doing something with one hand while having the information in the other hand. So instead of a very fancy, nice looking iPad contraption, and it ended up being this handheld, which in reality was much more effective than what the original idea was. So pay attention to context. Again, build what they need, not what they want. And a lot of times you just have to ask these questions because a lot of times people will ask you for certain things, but then that's not actually what they need to get to the end goal. So you always want to be focusing on what is the end goal. So distilling by Steve Jobs, do not try to do everything, do one thing well. So she went around, she was going to build a dashboard, right? So she interviewed all the users that were going to use this dashboard and wrote down all of her notes here. How do you distill all of that down just to 2 to 4 goals? She then puts it all on sticky notes, and this is called affinity mapping, understanding what ideas are coming up often, and then also the importance of these ideas. So maybe something is, coming up a lot, but it's not important, or the other way around. So this just helps you, again, essentially visualize in the real world how to include all of those very specific needs in your dashboard. And then ideate, the first idea is often not the best idea. And the whole point here is quantity over quality. So when you're in this first step of your process, you just want all the ideas possible. And again, finding those common threads. So this exercise, I did this with my sales team. It's called Crazy Eights. You fold up a piece of paper, so it has 8 squares. You give them 5 minutes. You say, okay, perfect dashboard. What would you see? Go. And then that really makes them all the top of mind things, the most important things come to mind. And then comparing against all of the users, you can find out what you want to include. The other piece here is blue sky thinking. Again, make them think of what are the ideas, as of right now, what's possible, what do you want to see? And then also make them think, okay, in a perfect world, no limitations, what would you want to see? And then you can meet somewhere in the middle and you really come up with these creative solutions that are very different from just the day-to-day mundane things and also possible. I love this one. So validate, do not seek praise, seek criticism. This is my favorite tip. Always pretend that your colleagues made it. So you're like, oh yeah, this thing came from marketing. I don't know. What do you guys think? And they will actually give you honest feedback versus if you said you made your own dashboard, they'll typically just be so excited that you made it and they know how much work you put into it. And they'll typically say, yeah, it's great, it's great. So if you pretend that someone else made it, you'll get better feedback. The other thing is giving your users a task. So the example there is think about when Uber first started, right? Did you have to watch an hour-long tutorial on how to use it? No, you downloaded the app from the App Store and then you were in a stranger suburban driving down the highway 5 minutes later. So it has to be really intuitive for the user. And it's really helpful to watch them while they're using it and say, hey, okay, if you're, give me an example of a business scenario. How would you use this dashboard? And then have them walk you through what they're doing, whether that's trying to click on something. Oh, I thought it was a drop down, or oh, I thought it would filter out. And that'll really help you understand how they're thinking about it and what changes to make to it. And this is also one of my favorite quotes, especially for the IT crowd. I feel like a lot of times I have to tell them this quote, perfect is the enemy of done, 98% of your data. I'm good with that. Doesn't have to be 100%. It's much better to have, these quick data that you can act upon versus trying to get it 100% perfect. So again, I have this on my desk. This is just a, one pager here as far as the design process and then those ideas that we talked about below. So the whole thing is this whole process, it is an iterative process. So you're never done necessarily. So just moving back and figuring out and adapting as your business changes can be really helpful. And then I highly recommend, and if any of you were here 3 years ago, we did do a giveaway, but Big Book of Dashboards, it is fantastic. It's a really nice book. I do recommend getting it the hard copy, not the Kindle version. There's a lot of visuals, obviously, and it's just really helpful in understanding the concepts behind user design. So with that, do we have any questions in the chat?
No questions so far.
Okay, and then we'll have a section at the end for questions as well. So be sure to keep your questions in mind. Feel free to write them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself at the end when we have the section for questions. So Marty couldn't be here today, so I'm covering off on this one. So visualization theory. So looking at types of data, right? There's three main types of data. You heard Scott drop some of these different names. So categorical data, talking about things, mutually exclusive labels, you're talking brands. Ordinal is similar to categorical, except it's in a distinct order. You're talking rankings, things like that. And then quantitative can be measured and then added up, or you can do calculations on it. So the whole point of why you visualize data, and this is helpful too if if your company isn't necessarily sold on the idea of Tableau, but a lot of this stuff comes from this big book of dashboards. So you're essentially getting a SparkNotes version here. So with this, I have no idea what this means. It's just a bunch of numbers on the screen. When you put it into a chart, you can find that there's actually very clear patterns in this data. So looking at sales, right, this is probably how a lot of, I feel like even if you do have Tableau, sales teams typically still do put this up on a slide and they'll show everyone this eye chart. Okay, how are sales? Yep. This doesn't necessarily tell me anything right away. But if you see it in a graphical illustration, you can say, oh, okay, wow, sales are up, and we were a little bit down in 2017. That didn't look so great. Technology is going through the roof. So here's another example. You guys can interact along. So normally in person, we would have you yell it out, but you can just do it yourself. So there are 2,000 numbers on this grid, and there's only one number 9. Did you spot it before seeing any other numbers? Probably not. So it's actually the top right there. And similar to this, right? Understanding how many 9s are in this data set. It'd be very hard to tell. Now that we've used color, it's a little bit easier. But and then even size is a little bit more difficult than color, but it's still better than them all being the same size. But you have to be cautious not to overuse color, right? So when we had the one color red, it was very easy to spot the 9s, but I see this a lot with different dashboards. They want to use color, but then it just becomes overwhelming with all these different colors that are included. So if we wanted to figure out what's the frequency of each number, if we put it into a bar chart, you can easily see that, oh, there's 13 9s and there's 16 6s. And then again, using color makes it even more clear to instantly see how many 9s there are. And even better if we sort it largest to smallest. And again, in Tableau, you just click that little Z to A bar chart there to easily see, okay, 6 is the most common number here. And again, this is really, really key when you think about visualizing data. Talk about restraining, reducing, and then emphasizing. If you remember those 3 principles, it really helps a ton. So even if your dashboard's really complicated in the beginning, or I think about the same thing even in presentations, right? My PowerPoint presentations might be really busy in the beginning, but it's like, how do we make these into either like categories or somehow reduce the complexity? And then what point are we really trying to get across here? The next thing is pre-attentive attributes. So essentially, this is something that your brain automatically processes without you even thinking about it. You pay attention to it before anything else, and then it's just very easy to emphasize what's important. So all of the pre-attentive attributes, there's form, color, position, motion, there's a ton of them, but it's really important to know when to use each one. So for color specifically, right, this is the most common and really most important one to use. It's also the most misused one. And a lot of really great visualizations don't necessarily have a ton of color on them. So one of the things I recommend if you're trying to get inspiration is they actually have a daily, I think it's the weekly viz. So if you look on Tableau, they have a Monday viz that's like the viz of the week, and those are just like fantastic, beautiful visualizations. They include all of the actual Tableau files, and you can dig in and see how they created each of those. So a couple more examples here. And then color should only be used in 3 ways: sequential, diverging, or categorical. There's a look at sequential. You can see, okay, Alabama looks like it has a much higher unemployment rate. then like the middle part of the country there has some of the lowest. Spending per student, again, is similar. It's again a diverging, so higher, low. And then categorical, again, I really don't recommend using more than 3 colors. You could maybe go 4, it depends on what it looks like. But 3 is about the maximum number of colors I'd recommend using. And again, just using color to highlight helps a lot. And just, again, your dashboards are gonna be much cleaner if you use fewer colors, so there's less for the eye to see. Also interesting is color blindness. So a lot of people don't realize this fact. People don't go around saying, oh, hey, I'm colorblind. But a lot of people may not admit they're colorblind, and they might not be impacted by your visualization like they could be if they could actually see the difference in the colors. So most colorblind people are men. So 7% of men are colorblind, only 0.4% of women are colorblind. So if you consider a 50-50 split in an organization of 500 people, 18 of those people would be colorblind. So if you use the red-green, which is what Excel I feel like typically uses, then that's going to be really hard for them to tell the difference between those. But if you went with the blue-orange, which is the go-to for Tableau, that's going to be much easier for them to see those same trends. And again, greatest value of a picture is when it forces us to notice what we never expected to see. And again, data visualization is just all about trying to get your idea across in the fastest way possible. So I have a whole presentation that I like to give to all of my coworkers about why they should not be using pie charts. I've yet to convince the upper management, but we'll try, continue my plight here. So we're going to avoid circle-based charts. It's really hard to see the differences. If there's a lot of categories, you can't really tell. And again, also difficult to tell like how big each category is in comparison to the other. So as an example here, and again, if we were in person, I could have you guys yell it out. The first one, how much do we think that is? 25% looks like. Okay, cool. The second one, I don't know, it's somewhere between like, I don't know, a third maybe. The third one, okay, that looks like maybe a little more, maybe it's 40%. And so clearly I got, the middle one wrong. It was actually the middle one and the right one are the same. They're just on different axes. Same thing here, right? You have to be a little bit careful with bubble charts, like, how much bigger is the green one versus the gray one? It's really hard. And then same thing here if you just compare it against the different circles. But now if you did that same exact data in a bar chart, you could easily see, oh, okay, binders are, this much bigger than paper, and that makes total sense. And bookcases are all the way down there. They're one of the lowest selling categories. And the one exception to pie charts is if you are measuring something that's like a yes, no, or like a executed, not executed, I'm okay with those kind of like donut charts, which I do believe we've covered donut charts. So I will link to that whenever we send out the recap. I will send you guys the donut chart info. And then again, just because it looks nice doesn't necessarily mean it's helpful. Here's a few examples of like really, they like even this one looks nice, but what is it really telling you, right? Sales by region. I don't know how much is corporate or how much is consumer. I have no idea how to compare those. You see some of these donut charts within each other. Again, it's just very messy. The medicine manufacturing process, again, would be better suited for a bar chart. This one's really tough to tell as well, right? Like the 56% to see how much bigger it is versus the 43. If you didn't have those numbers on there, you wouldn't be able to tell. And then a few other things to stay away from. So stacked bars that have a lot of segments. So typically 5 is about the maximum you want, and even that might be pushing it. Word clouds, they're good for, some presentations if you want to show that, hey, I don't know, consumer sentiment or something like that. But in general, they're not the best way of showing data. And then visuals where either there's like no scale to understand what it looks like, it's not constant, and even the one chart there's like 3 things all layered on top of each other, and it's really hard to understand what it's trying to convey. And then if you guys want some tips, or if you want to read more about user-centered design, here's just a couple of recommendations of books that you guys can look into further. I do recommend too, if you, I use Scribed a lot. It's an audiobook app. It's like $9 a month and it's unlimited. So they have a lot of these books that you can listen to on audiobook. So with that, I will go ahead and stop the recording so you guys can open up. There's pause.